Thanks to our friends at The Motley Fool for sponsoring this video. Visit fool.com/Rive to receive the top 10 stocks to buy right now. Adobe has faced a lot of questions over the last year, from its potential acquisition of Figma for $20 billion to the impact on the company's business of artificial intelligence. But I think this is actually a really well-positioned company for the future of AI and the future of creativity. So I want to get into what I like about the company going forward, and then the questions that I have about the stock. Not every company makes a great investment. So I want to talk through the questions that I have and what I want to see from the stock in the future. My name is Travis Hoyam. Thank you for watching Rive Investing. Please subscribe here on YouTube for all my content. And first, I think it's worth just looking at how well Adobe has done over the last decade. The company has grown revenue tremendously. You can see here that revenue is up about 320%, and net income is up over 700% over the last 10 years. That has coincided with the company moving into a subscription business and away from one-time sales of its products. That's something that has happened a lot for technology companies over the last decade, as we've moved from selling products on things like CDs to operating in the cloud. And that's something that Adobe did along with a lot of other players in the market. But it did have that legacy business, and it kind of had to disrupt its own business to move to subscriptions. But it's been extremely successful, and you can see that the margins continue to be really strong for Adobe. With products like Photoshop and Illustrator, this has become an industry standard tool. And I think that's a really critical thing to point out here, is that if you're in art school, you're probably going to learn at least one or more Adobe products. Now, there are a lot of competitors out there. I use Canva on a regular basis, but Adobe continues to be the real go-to for professionals, and especially for commercial professionals. And that's where I want to highlight what the company is doing with Firefly. Firefly is Adobe's AI tool, and it works very similar to something like Midjourney. What's unique is that Adobe has built it on models that it knows where the art comes from. So a lot of the models that are built for a lot of these AI tools are just scraping data from the internet and art from the internet. And if you're a commercial operator, a big company who's hiring an ad agency or maybe creating something yourself, you don't want to be in a situation where you're being sued because someone else's art was used to create the model that then ultimately created the art that you're using in your business. So Adobe has really answered that by building its own model based on art that it knows where it comes from. This does a few things for the company. It really shows that it's going to be a trusted partner for a lot of these commercial companies. But management has also talked about being able to allow creators to sell tools into this AI system. So let's say I was an artist and I have a style that's kind of my own. I could say, Adobe, I'll allow you to sell Travis Hoyam's style into Firefly, and then I get a certain cut of when anybody says, create an image with Travis Hoyam's style. That would be an example of how that works. And if you've used Midjourney, you'll see people do that on a regular basis. They'll create a piece of art that is based on someone else's style that's not their own. So again, that's a really interesting use case and a way to think about AI as leveraging it in your big position. They also are using vectors in a little bit different way than a lot of the other tools, because a lot of artists are using vector art. You can't just have an image that can't be modified. They want to have vector art like this. And so this is an example here of that vector art being created and then being able to modify that in Adobe's tools. And then there's editing as well. I think this is going to be the other thing, is not only is Adobe's tools going to be used for creating images, but also editing images. This is a company that creates the tools that Hollywood studios use to edit their films. So those kind of high-end capabilities are going to be really important. And maybe those new AI tools aren't quite the right tools for those kind of high-end use cases. The question is going to be, is Adobe able to broaden the base? I can see this be a case where Adobe becomes even more ingrained with a lot of big companies who don't want to take the risk on using artificial intelligence tools to create the art that they're going to use in their commercial operations. They just don't want to take that financial risk. It's just not worth it. But there are going to be a lot of smaller creators who are willing to take that risk. But does Adobe able to make these tools easy enough and cheap enough that they can broaden the base in the use case, make something like myself feel like you can actually create a piece of art, create a piece of vector art, which I don't do in Photoshop, which I don't do in something like Illustrator. So if Adobe can actually do that and leverage AI to make everyone a better creator, that's where they're able to really grow the pie for the entire creative industry. That's where I think they're in a really interesting position. There could be a lot of disruptive forces from artificial intelligence, but the company does seem to be leaning into AI. And I think that could help broaden the base and increase the number of users that are using Adobe's products. In that respect, they wouldn't have to necessarily increase prices to make more money. They would just have to increase the number of users or offer more tiers. So that's really one way that the company can leverage its position in the market. But I do want to talk about why I'm skeptical of Adobe stock, why I'm not buying it today. As much as I like the company, I like its attitude towards potential disruption in AI, it's just too expensive for me right now. This chart looks at the company's price to sales ratio and price to earnings multiple. And you can see here, price to sales is almost 10x. Price to earnings is 37x. Those aren't crazy multiples for Adobe historically, but we're talking about a company that's worth $174 billion. That's a really big company. So to have upside, they would have to keep those kind of multiples or grow into the multiples. And growing into the multiple means that the stock doesn't go up despite the fact that the multiple comes down. That's really what I worried about. I would like to get a price that's about half of what we're paying right now for this stock. That's where I think it would be really, really attractive. Even 25 times earnings would be a reasonable multiple to pay for something like Adobe. I also worry a little bit that adding something like Figma to the business is going to hurt financials, at least in the near term. Long term, I think that's going to be a great move. But short term, it could hurt the company's cost structure and margins as they integrate that business, assuming it's able to go through. And it's obviously going to hurt the balance sheet because it's $20 billion. So this is a case where I love the company. I don't love the stock. And for investors, that's okay. We don't have to take a position in every stock, but this is absolutely one that's on my radar. And if it comes down in price, I would absolutely love to add this to my portfolio because I think Adobe's creative tools are just going to be used in more and more use cases and more interesting use cases in the future, not only by professionals, but by amateurs as well. And that's a unique position for the company, something that they haven't been doing for most of the last few decades. But what do you think of Adobe stock? I'd love to hear your comments in the comments section below. And what do you think about the stock price? Is it trading for a fair value right now? Are you not scared away by the price like I am? Give me your thoughts. And thank you for watching, everybody. I appreciate it. I'll see you here next time.